Imagine waking up one day to the faint metallic taste of dread on your tongue. The alarm hasn't even sounded yet, but you are already awake, already besieged. There is no external enemy at the door, no crisis flashing across your phone screen. The battlefield is not out there. It is in here. In the silent, sprawling space between your ears. You lie there, and the first artillery shell of the day lands. A memory from yesterday. A clumsy remark you made in a meeting now playing on a loop, edited and remixed by an invisible critic to highlight your every flaw. You flinch. Then, the counter-offensive. A voice, fainter but determined, insists it wasn't that bad, that everyone has already forgotten. But the first voice scoffs. It knows better. It has cataloged every failure you've ever had, and it is not afraid to use them. This is how it begins. Not with a shout, but with a whisper. A silent civil war of identity fought on the terrain of your own consciousness. One moment you are the hero of your own story, capable and confident. The next, you are the imposter, the fraud, waiting to be discovered. You are both the prisoner and the warden, the tyrant and the rebel. You feel a profound, unsettling split, as if there are two of you locked in the same skull, fighting for control of a single life. Who are you, truly? Are you the one who sets the ambitious goal, who dreams of a healthier body, a sharper mind, a more meaningful career? Or are you the one who, 10 minutes later, is scrolling mindlessly, seeking the cheap dopamine hit that numbs the anxiety that very ambition created? Are you the one who craves deep connection, love, and intimacy? Or are you the one who builds walls, who overthinks texts, who sabotages potential relationships before they can even begin, all to avoid the specter of potential rejection? This is the central paradox of the human condition, that the very mind which contains our greatest potential, our capacity for love, foresight, and creativity, is also the source of our most exquisite suffering. It is a generator of fictional futures, of imagined slights, of self-inflicted wounds that never break the skin but can cripple a soul. We are haunted not by ghosts, but by possibilities. Tormented not by what is, but by what could be. And we are, each of us, the silent, unseen author of our own anguish. Why? Why would a mind evolved over millennia for survival and flourishing turn against itself? Why does the voice of self-doubt often speak in a louder, more convincing tone than the voice of self-belief? Why do we cling to stories about ourselves that are painful, limiting, and often outright false, as if they were sacred texts? We would never allow another person to speak to us the way we speak to ourselves in the quiet moments. We would call it abuse. We would walk away. And yet, we not only tolerate this internal abuse, we fund it. We house it. We give it a microphone and a captive audience of one. What if this internal conflict isn't a sign of brokenness, but a fundamental feature of being human? What if the war is not something to be won, but something to be understood? And what if hidden within this daily struggle lies the very key to unlocking a level of consciousness, peace, and power you've only glimpsed in your most quiet and courageous moments? The answers do not lie in simply thinking positive thoughts or in trying to violently silence the negative ones. That is merely a different tactic in the same endless war. The truth is far stranger, more ancient, and more liberating. To discover it, we must first venture into the shadowy origins of this divide and meet the two opposing generals who command the armies in your mind. To understand the conflict, we must first meet the generals. They are not random intruders. They are born from the very architecture of your consciousness. forged in the fires of evolution and the anvil of personal experience. They are, in the language of depth psychology, archetypal forces, and they are ancient. On one side stands the ego. This is not the Freudian ego of popular misconception, the mere mediator. This is the conscious I, the architect of your identity. It is the part of you that gets out of bed, pays the bills, and navigates the social world. Its primary mission is coherence and safety. It wants a stable, predictable narrative for your life. It craves control, definition, and above all, it needs to feel separate and distinct. It is the voice that says, "This is me, and that is not me." It builds the fortress of your personality, brick by brick, from your accomplishments, your beliefs, your job title, your roles, mother, father, artist, provider. The ego is necessary. It is the captain of the ship, but it is a terrified captain sailing a vast and unknown ocean. Its greatest fear is dissolution, the terrifying notion that the I it has so carefully constructed might be thinner than it appears, a fragile performance over an abyss of chaos. And so, to protect itself, it does something ingenious and ultimately devastating. It exiles any part of you that threatens its neat narrative, the shameful memory, the primal anger, the unacceptable desire, the vulnerability it deems as weakness, is cut off, denied, and cast into the inner shadows. The Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung called this hidden repository the shadow. It is the psychological basement where we lock away everything we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. We think we have hidden these traits away forever, but we haven't. They do not disappear. They gather strength in the darkness. They coalesce into a second general, a hostile opposing force within your own ranks. This is the origin of the enemy voice. The saboteur, the critic, the whisper of dread. It is not an alien invader. It is your own shadow, your own disowned self, projected back at you. The ego, in its desperate quest for a positive self-image, creates its own nemesis. The war is not between you and some external force. It is a civil war between the part of you that is seen and the part of you that is denied. The voice that tells you you're a fraud, that is the exiled insecurity your ego refused to integrate. The sudden, inexplicable rage, that is the buried injustice you were never allowed to express. The profound sense of lack, that is the wholeness you fractured when you decided certain parts of you were not welcome. This internal split is amplified by a society that profits from your fragmentation. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre called this bad faith, the act of lying to ourselves to avoid the terrifying weight of our own freedom. We willingly conform to labels and roles, reducing our infinite potential to a finite marketable identity. Consumer, employee profile. We are sold quick fixes for the anxiety that is the inherent byproduct of this self-betrayal. Buy this, achieve that, look this way, and the war will stop. But it never does. It only gives the ego new, shinier bricks for its fortress, and the shadow new, more potent material to weaponize. The ancient Stoics saw this clearly. They spoke of the dichotomy of control, arguing that our suffering stems from mistaking external events which we cannot control for our internal judgments about them, which we can. But we have internalized the opposite. We desperately try to control the external world to soothe our internal chaos, a futile endeavor that only exhausts us and strengthens the shadow's claim that we are powerless. Meanwhile, the German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, a profoundly pessimistic but piercingly insightful thinker, saw the human will, this blind, striving, relentless life force within us, as the ultimate source of our torment. We are condemned to want, to desire, to seek. Satisfaction, when it comes, is fleeting, only to be replaced by a new want. The war, for Schopenhauer, is between this ceaseless, striving will and our intellect, which can see the futile cycle but often feels powerless to stop it. We are, as he famously stated, like a pendulum swinging between the agony of lack and the boredom of satisfaction. The battlefield is our own restless nature. So the hidden problem is not that you are at war. The problem is that you are fighting, on the wrong front with the wrong weapons against a misunderstood enemy. You believe the conflict is between you and your circumstances, or between positive you and negative you. In reality, it is a clash between the identity you have constructed and the parts of yourself you have been forced to abandon. The anxiety, the depression, the self-loathing, these are not the enemy. They are the symptoms. They are the cries of the exiled, the loyal soldiers you court-martialed and left for dead, now returning to the front lines armed with your own rejected power. They are not trying to destroy you. In their twisted, hostile way, they are trying to make you whole again. But this return is not a peaceful reunification. It is a violent insurgency. And if left unresolved, it doesn't just cause personal turmoil. It begins to sculpt your entire reality, trapping you in a world of your own unconscious making. The war is not contained. It does not respect borders. The fallout from this internal conflict seeps out, unnoticed, coloring the very fabric of your reality. It dictates the choices you make, the relationships you form, the life you inhabit. You believe you are navigating the world consciously, making free decisions, but more often than not you are a puppet, and your unconscious shadow is pulling the strings. This is the genesis of the self-fulfilling prophecy. Consider the person whose shadow contains a deep-seated belief in their own unworthiness. Their ego, desperate to avoid the pain of this truth, constructs a narrative of superiority or independence. But the shadow's belief is the stronger current. Unconsciously, they will sabotage their relationships, preemptively rejecting others before they can be rejected. They will procrastinate on crucial projects, ensuring they never truly test their worth in the arena. They will interpret a partner's neutral comment as criticism, sparking a fight that validates their core wound. See, I am unlovable. They are an architect, but they are building their own prison, one self-defeating action at a time, all while believing they are a victim of a cruel world. This is the unseen consequence. Your internal state operates as a perceptual filter, a lens that distorts everything you see. Cognitive psychologists call this confirmation bias, but it runs far deeper than simply seeking confirming news articles. It is a primal, neurological editing process. Your reticular activating system, RAS, the brain's gatekeeper, prioritizes information that confirms your existing beliefs, especially the deep subconscious ones held in the shadow. If your shadow believes the world is threatening, your RAS will highlight every cutoff in traffic, every tersely worded email, every potential slight, while filtering out kindness, beauty, and connection. You are not seeing the world as it is. You are seeing a world that proves you right. This is how the war constructs your cage. You become trapped in a consensus reality of one. Your life narrows. Opportunities that challenge your ego's fragile narrative are ignored. People who reflect your disowned light or darkness are pushed away. You live in a smaller and smaller world, not because the world itself is small, but because your perception has been shrunk to the size of your wound. This contraction manifests in 1,000 subtle ways. The constant low-grade anxiety that modern life accepts as normal, that is not a natural state of being. It is the hum of the ego's defense systems perpetually on alert, scanning for threats to its identity. The exhaustion you feel at the end of a day spent doing nothing, that is the psychic drain of maintaining the fortress, of keeping the exiles locked down, of performing an identity that feels increasingly brittle, the profound loneliness that persists even when you are surrounded by people. That is the inevitable result of being cut off from your own wholeness. How can you possibly be truly known and loved by another when you have disowned and hidden so much of yourself from you? You offer others a carefully curated exhibit, while the real masterpiece, flaws, darkness and all, collects dust in the vault. You crave connection but settle for performance. On a societal scale, this internal fragmentation becomes a cultural cancer. The shadow does not just operate on an individual level. We project our collective shadows onto the other. The hatred, for a political party, a social group, a nationality, it is often a convenient container for the qualities we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. Our own laziness is projected onto the welfare recipient. Our own aggression is projected onto the foreign power. Our own ignorance is projected onto the uneducated. This externalizes the war, turning the world into a mirror of our internal conflict, but it never resolves it. It just makes the battlefield larger and more dangerous. We become a society of traumatized individuals, acting out our unconscious wounds on a global stage, all while believing we are fighting for a righteous cause. The ultimate and most devastating consequence is the erosion of meaning. The existentialist Viktor Frankl, writing from the unimaginable horror of the Nazi concentration camps, concluded that the primary drive in life is not pleasure, as Freud argued, but the will to meaning. Yet how can you find meaning when you are at war with yourself? Your energy is siphoned into managing the conflict, into maintaining the facade. You become a reactor, responding to internal and external triggers rather than an author, consciously crafting a story for your life. Your life becomes a problem to be solved, a burden to be managed, rather than a mystery to be lived. You chase external validations, likes, promotions, possessions, hoping they will silence the conflict, but they are just noise that drowns out the question for a moment. The silence that follows is even more deafening. This is the great tragedy. You could spend your entire life trying to win this war, only to discover on your deathbed that you were fighting for a kingdom that never existed. And in the process, you missed the actual territory of your life, the raw, unfiltered, terrifying, and beautiful experience of being. But this is not inevitable. The cage has a door. The war has a purpose. It is not a flaw to be eradicated, but a signal to be understood. And the key to unlocking it lies not in escalation, but in a radical and counterintuitive act of treason. If the strategy of total victory, annihilating the negative voice, eradicating self-doubt, has only led to a stalemate and the slow erosion of your spirit, then the only path left is not to fight harder but to fight differently. This requires a mutiny, not against one general or the other, but against the very premise of the war itself. The rebellion is not an act of violence, but an act of profound and terrifying curiosity. The first and most radical step is to lay down your weapons, to declare a unilateral ceasefire. This does not mean surrender to the shadow. It means ceasing to identify with the ego's desperate need to win. You must step back from the front lines and become something else entirely, an observer. This is the essence of mindfulness, but stripped of its modern, wellness-oriented packaging. This is not about achieving bliss. It is about developing forensic awareness. It is the practice of noticing the thought without becoming the thought. You are not an anxious person. You are a consciousness that is experiencing the sensation of anxiety. You are not your anger. You are the space in which the anger arises, resides, and passes away. This shift in perspective, from identified participant to neutral witness, is the single most powerful act of rebellion you can undertake. It creates a gap, a breath of freedom between the stimulus and your response. In that gap lies your power. In that quiet space of observation, you can begin the true work, not of silencing the shadow, but of listening to it. This is the counterintuitive heart of the rebellion. Your inner critic, your anxiety, your rage, they are not monsters to be slain. They are messengers. They are lost children of your psyche screaming to get the ego's attention. They speak a crude and painful language, but they carry intelligence. When the voice of inadequacy whispers, "You're going to fail," the ego's instinct is to argue, "No, I'm not," or to collapse. "You're right, I'm useless." Both are acts of war. The rebel's response is to lean in with calm curiosity and ask, "What are you trying to protect me from?" Often the answer is startling. That voice of impending failure is not trying to sabotage you. It is a misguided attempt to shield you from the pain of disappointment. It would rather you never try than risk the shattering of your self-image. Its method is twisted, but its intention is in a warped way loyal. This process is what Carl Jung called integration. It is the act of welcoming the exile home. It is hearing the shadow's message, acknowledging the truth it carries, however partial, and reclaiming the energy you have spent locking it away. That critical voice holds a piece of your discernment. Your anxiety holds a portion of your foresight. Your anger holds a kernel of your boundaries and your sense of justice. By disowning them, you didn't get rid of these qualities. You merely corrupted them into weapons. Integration is the alchemical process of transforming the weapon back into the tool. This is not a passive intellectual exercise. It is a practice. It requires you to engage in what the Stoics called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Not as an exercise in pessimism, but as a way to consciously walk into the scenarios your shadow fears most. By voluntarily contemplating failure, rejection, and loss, you rob them of their terrifying unconscious power. You realize that even if the worst happens, the eye that observes it will still be there. The ego may be shattered, but your conscious core remains. This is how you build existential resilience. You must also curate your environment to support the rebel. Your brain is a prediction engine, and it takes cues from the world around it. The endless scroll of social media, the diet of outrage news, the consumption of art that glorifies fragmentation. This is all ammunition for the war. It reinforces the ego's fears and empowers the shadow's distortions. A rebel must be a gatekeeper of their own senses. This isn't about avoidance, it's about consciously choosing to feed the mind with material that reinforces wholeness, nuance, and compassion for yourself and others. This rebellion will feel unnatural at first. The ego will scream that you are capitulating to the enemy. The shadow will test you, escalating its attacks to see if you are truly a new kind of leader. There will be days you feel you are losing ground. But you are not. Every time you pause, observe, and inquire, you are weakening the old paradigm. You are firing the two generals and assuming command yourself. You are no longer a pawn in a civil war. You are becoming the sovereign of your own inner kingdom. And a sovereign's duty is not to eliminate the diverse voices in their court, but to listen to them all. The fearful, the angry, the hopeful, the wise, and then from a place of centered awareness, make a conscious choice. The war's chaos gives way to a complex, sometimes noisy, but ultimately harmonious democracy of the self. The energy once spent on fighting is now available for building, creating, and living. This sovereign state is not a destination of permanent peace. It is a new way of navigating the eternal tension of being human. And from this vantage point, a final, breathtaking realization begins to dawn, one that redefines the very purpose of the struggle you've endured. The ceasefire holds. The observations have been made. The messengers have been heard. The energy of the conflict, once a chaotic storm ripping through your interior world, has been harnessed. A new quiet power hums within you. But this is not the end. It is the threshold. For now you are prepared to receive the ultimate truth, the revelation that reframes every battle you have ever fought, every wound you have ever carried. The war was never a mistake. It was not a design flaw in the human condition, or a curse to be broken. It was, and is, the necessary furnace of consciousness itself. The two generals, the ego and the shadow, are not your enemies. They are the divine antagonists in the epic story of your becoming. The ego, with its desperate need for structure and identity, provides the necessary container, the vessel. The shadow, with its chaotic, raw, and untamed power, provides the content, the fuel. Their tension is not a problem to be solved. It is the creative tension that exists at the heart of every great work of art, every leap of science, every profound spiritual awakening. A violin string makes music only when it is stretched to the point of tension between two opposing anchors. Your soul is that string. The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche glimpsed this terrifying and glorious truth when he wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. You have spent a lifetime trying to exterminate your inner chaos, to silence the chaos, to organize it into submission. But that chaos is the unformed matter of your potential. The anxiety is energy. The fear is focus. The anger is a boundary. The sadness is depth. The negative voices are not errors. They are intensities of life that you, as the emerging sovereign, are now learning to channel and direct." The war was the violent, unconscious thrashing of these energies against the walls of a container that was too small, too rigid, too frightened to hold them. Your entire life you have been seeking resolution. You wanted the war to end. You wanted one side to finally, definitively win so you could have peace. But the ultimate truth is that wholeness is not the absence of conflict. It is the capacity to contain it. It is the ability to hold the contradiction, to live the question, to embrace the paradox of your own nature without rushing to dissolve it into a comfortable and therefore false certainty. You are both light and dark. You are both courageous and terrified. You are both infinite spirit and a finite, fragile animal. To deny either pole is to live a half-life. The goal is to expand the container of your consciousness until it is vast enough to hold all of you, without fracturing. This is what it means to be integrated. This is what it means to be free. From this vantage point, your entire history rewrites itself. That period of deep depression was not a wasted year. It was a descent into the underworld to retrieve a lost piece of your soul. That searing heartbreak was not a punishment. It was the shattering of a too small vessel, forcing you to build a larger one. That agonizing anxiety was not a malfunction. It was a call to presence, a demand to stop living in the fictional future and plant your feet firmly in the reality of the now. Every skirmish, every wound, every retreat was necessary. It was all grist for the mill of your awakening. You had to be lost to appreciate the map. You had to feel the confines of the cage to develop the strength to break out of it.